men who had seen a lot of nuclear tests by 1952, who, when they saw the Mike test, were frightened. It just seemed to keep coming at them as they stood on their ships watching this thing grow and grow until the mushroom cloud was 100 miles across.
With the super, America regained its nuclear preeminence. 9 months later, the Soviet Union successfully tested an H-bomb of its own. Robert Oppenheimer's opposition to the hydrogen bomb was interpreted by government officials as disloyalty to the United States. In hearings held by the Atomic Energy Commission, he was stripped of his security clearance and retired to academic life a broken man. Edward Teller was treated as an outcast by many of his colleagues for testifying against Oppenheimer, but he won the battle of the super. He would go on to advise the government on nuclear issues throughout the Cold War.
Taking to the hills, the rocky cliffs above California's Beverly Hills to visit the first atomic survival house. Only the overhead...
With the world on edge over the threat of nuclear war, Americans invented ways of coping with Armageddon.
Hal Hayes, a bachelor, spent $250,000 on this hideaway where he can sit out any atomic attack in comfort. There's champagne on tap, along with a variety of stronger stimulants, just in case anyone needs a bracer when the bombs are falling. And a radiation-proof curtain will keep out the uninvited gamma rays.
The weirdness of the time,
An indoor swimming pool is provided.
the paranoia of the time, the atmosphere was so tense. I remember more than one time walking on the beach, facing New York, but not being able to see it, but there seemed to be a great stillness suddenly. Birds weren't flying. Something was happening. I felt immediately. Everything was just too quiet. And I looked off to the direction of the city just to see if there might be a mushroom cloud rising.
We bought a house on the Berkeley Hill with a big picture window overlooking the Golden Gate. And Emilio Segre, Nobel Prize winner in physics, came to visit us. He said to my wife, "Charlotte, you will pay for this view with your life." He was afraid that San Francisco would be bombed with an atomic bomb, and he personally moved out of Berkeley back to Walnut Creek, about 20 miles inland over the hill.
There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and Bert the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him,
A government-sponsored campaign taught children what to do in the event of nuclear attack.
he ducked and covered, ducked and covered. He did what we all must learn to do. You and you and you and you, ducked and covered.
I think there was probably a deliberate effort on the part of the United States government to play down the destructiveness of nuclear weapons. When children were taught that they could dive into a ditch as if this were a tornado going by, when children were taught that if they hid under their desks, covered their heads with their hands, duck and cover, that somehow that would be enough for them to survive. They were being taught at most the Hiroshima level of destructiveness.
Some of us actually refused to do it, but for some kids, this is when you found out in your peers who was the most afraid, because a lot of kids wouldn't talk about it. It was a subject that they perhaps didn't really want to participate in because it wasn't sports and it wasn't whatever. So those drills were very revealing to the rest of their classmates when we saw who was really the most afraid.
There might not be any grown-ups around when the bomb explodes. Then you're on your own.
Very vivid nightmare of this ball of fire that was sort of out there, and I just sort of walking toward it, you know, and I would see myself actually engulfed in this thing, and I remember jumping up and screaming, and sweating and feeling, that was one of the few nightmares I still remember very dramatically to this day.
This is Times Square, New York, prior to the start of civil defense drill, highlighting Operation Alert. The drill is part of the survival phase of the fourth such test held in this country. Less than 2 minutes after the take cover signal, the streets were cleared. Times Square is deserted.
I wrote a piece for Esquire about the whole madness of the civil defense drills, and I interviewed some general who was in charge of civil defense for New York in case of an atomic attack. And he kept talking to me, in all this jargon, and I said, look, just tell me this. Well, what happens if an atom actually hits New York? And he says, you mean ground zero? And I said, yeah, what if it hits Manhattan? He says, it's goodbye, New York. So I wrote a piece called Goodbye, New York.
What would you do if you had the air raid warning system here in Denver sound a warning that a real atomic attack was imminent?
Well, I think just what we're supposed to do, and that is to find our shelters.
I think I'd find the baby, get a chair, sit down, and wait. I know nothing else to do.
You don't know where you'd wait?
Inside. I wouldn't go in the cellar. Sit in the living room.
Put your trust in what?
God. Beyond that, I have none other.
Again, the fireball. Now, for dramatic effect, we superimpose it on the skyline of New York. The heart of the metropolis would be instantaneously transformed into an inferno, while shock and heat waves devastated the rest of the city.
You really learned that there could be an absolute atomic disaster in your town. We had a nice house in Huntington Woods, Michigan, and we had a fruit cellar down there. And at my behest, and I'm not sure my wife thought I was in my right mind, but we put bunks down there, and we put sleeping bags down there, and we put extra water down there, and we put canned food down there, and I kept trying to figure out some way to reinforce the ceiling. I don't think I ever figured that out. But the theory was that when we heard the sirens go, we were all going to run down there and go in, and we might have to stay in there for 2 weeks. So we had it stocked up to support us for 2 weeks.
A new housing development near Denver, Colorado shows the nation's first model homes with built-in fallout shelters. The room is designed with an atomic war in mind. But behind each 8-inch thick reinforced concrete wall, it may prove to be just what the harried housewife is looking for when life with the kids gets too hectic.
You can have as much explosive force as you want in a nuclear world, but you can't necessarily win when you get that much in the world. There is a level beyond which to use the force you have at your hand destroys you as well as your enemy.
I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart.
The United States and the Soviet Union developed the nuclear capability to wipe out one another's major cities many times over. The weapon that was designed to alleviate all fear had become the greatest fear of all.
No other will do.
The question is, was the arms race successful at the scale it extended to? Did we have to build so many? Did we have to put ourselves at such terrible risk? Did we have to nearly bankrupt ourselves? Because it wasn't only the Soviet Union. There's been one reliable estimate based on government numbers that the arms race, if you count the delivery systems as well as the bombs, cost us $4 trillion. And that was the United States' national debt in 1994.
I just want to start a flame in your heart.
Men throughout the world learned to look on the brutal face of communism. Berlin, powder keg of Europe, saw a mass demonstration of indoctrinated young Germans.
For the first